Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. Shehbaz Sharif has effectively ended all the speculations surrounding the PMLN's involvement in the JUIF Azadi March. What does this mean for the march itself? Let's talk about that. Does it give, will it give the march the kind of numbers that will make it more effective, or does it still mean that kind of tacit support that Maulana Sahab was earlier being given, that was earlier being talked about? The support that in contrast the PPP offers. We'll be talking about that. We'll also be talking about the march and the challenges it can offer to political stability at this time, if any, and whether the government, the kind of pressure the government is feeling, or whether the government is taking it as part of the course and trying to deal with it as best as they can. We'll be talking about all of that today. I have with me Javed Siddique, who's a senior journalist. Thank you for being with us today. Javed Jadoon, who's a senior analyst. Thank you for joining us. And Barrister Said Masroor Shah, who is a legal expert. Thank you for joining us today. Gee, Javed Sahab, like I said, there was a lot of controversy surrounding the PMLN's involvement in the march, and of course, all the debate about whether the senior leadership, the former Prime Minister and Shehbaz Sharif Sahab were not on one page, and whether they would actually support Maulana Sahab or not. And that seems to have ended today with Shehbaz Sharif's statements. Do you think that it has ended? Do you think that the PMLN will support the march full throttle, considering that there seems to be some divide within the party anyway, because of the senior leadership being in jail and all of that?
I think after the letter that was written by PMLN chief, former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, that he will extend full support to this march, Azadi March of Maulana Fazlur Rahman, it was quite clear that PMLN is on the side of Maulana. And now the younger brother Shehbaz Sharif, about whose speculations were being made that the two brothers are not on the same page, and differences have arisen between them on this particular issue. I think those speculations are no longer valid, and they have decided, the party as a whole has decided to participate in this Azadi March. So there's no doubt about that. However,
but that participation, I mean, just to clarify, of course, the man on the ground at this time is Shehbaz Sharif Sahab, and the former Prime Minister is in jail, and there has been, if you look at the past, a difference of narrative between the PMLN.
Even today, when former Chief Minister of Punjab Shehbaz Sharif, younger brother of Nawaz Sharif, was speaking about this the support that they are going to extend to Azadi March, he was saying that there we will participate in this march, we will raise Pakistan Zindabad slogan, and we will also raise slogans in favor of Kashmiris.
Right,
so
exactly.
He didn't say that he will be participating in a march where he is going to say something
that is
against
targeted, according to Maulana Sahab, to get the resignation from the Prime
Minister. It is Maulana's demand, and Maulana has been saying this from the very beginning when he was planning this march. But I think the narrative of PMLN is very different. They have their own grievances. They are saying that the elections which were held last year, they were not fair and free. And now the demand of the PMLN is very different. They are saying that there should be fresh elections, there should be fair and free elections, and the 2018 elections were rigged and they were not fair. That's their demand. And they ascribe all the difficulties, all the problems that Pakistan is facing today is to these unfair and rigged elections of 2018. So there, even Ahsan Iqbal, the Secretary General, has said that all the problems that the country is facing today arose from those elections. And if you hold free and fair elections again, a new government is formed, probably all these problems can be addressed.
Right, we'll talk about that, whether the economy will suddenly flare up, what kind of a genie will come out of the bottle in a bit. But Javed Sahab, according to you, do you think that the difference in narrative when we talk about the PMLN, particularly the two brothers, Nawaz Sharif Sahab and Shehbaz Sharif Sahab, is there, and therefore, there seems to be that kind of division between the followers of the party. Even if the PMLN says that they will go ahead, with things like whether it will be an Azadi, it will be about Kashmir, or whether it will be about Pakistan, and in contrast, we've had Maulana Sahab saying that it will be about the resignation, like I was speaking about. Seems to be a contrast, at the very least. Isn't that true?
Thank you very much, Maruk. If you look at the media statement given by Mr. Shahbaz Sharif today, it was a very well-crafted, very carefully crafted statement, and it says all. He said that we would welcome Maulana when he reaches Islamabad. That
Right.
means they will not be part of the march, one.
Which
Secondly,
is synonymous with the PPP.
exactly.
Right.
Second, he said that after we assemble in Islamabad, we would announce our future course of action. That means he has kept the doors open. And I don't think so he is going to be, or the PMLN going to be part of the sit-in, if there is any sit-in in Islamabad. Thirdly, I think the doves have prevailed in the PMLN strategy. And ultimately, I think the narrative pursued by Mr. Shahbaz Sharif has been accepted by the party, and they are not going to be a destabilizing force to become part of Maulana's march towards Islamabad. Because Maulana's objectives are very well obvious, and he has said that he is going to topple the government, and they are going to do it this time around. And I think they are even given the figures, 1 to 1.5 million marchers coming to Islamabad. I think it is a very difficult situation for the two main political parties. They do not want to become part of a destabilizing force, and they do not want to be seen to be left behind as well. It is just like, I think, between the devil and the deep blue sea. They would like to be part of the march, but they wouldn't like to be a part of any step which can destabilize the whole system.
But
and
isn't it
ultimately,
better-
everybody stands to lose. It's not going to be a win-win situation.
But isn't it better at this time to either say that, on principle, which is I think initially where Bilawal Bhutto started from, that principally they're not, they're opposed to Maulana Saab's, his demand for resignation, and therefore, continuity, democracy, and all of that, and sit it out, rather than have this kind of a tacit agreement where, we don't know what the boundaries are, if any, and we don't know what kind of support they mean when they say that, it's a loosely worded, like you said, a well-crafted statement, which seems to be saying actually nothing.
Nothing, absolutely. I think they just want to play it safe. And I think Shahbaz Sharif's body language was not even very you saw him like a person who is a bit pessimist as well. The pessimism was, coming out of his personality, not the kind of a confidence he used to display. And the reason is, you're very right, there are fissures in the political party itself. The party is divided between two camps, one led by the Hawks and the other led by the Doves, and the Doves are led by Mr. Shahbaz Sharif. And of course, we know that the narratives of the two factions are quite different and quite contrasting. And in this given situation, I think Shahbaz Sharif's strategy, I think it is a very correct strategy. In the sense that he doesn't want to be left out, he doesn't want his party to be left out.
Or he can't afford
And he can't afford to be part of a destabilizing force as well. Maruk, if any number of people gather in Islamabad and they want to disrupt the normal life, and if they want to make the whole capital hostage, this is going to be, as your intro very, I think, rightly pointed toward this particular factor, that political destabilization is going to hurt the country in many ways, economically, politically, on foreign fronts as well.
Right.
Ongoing situation in Kashmir, Pakistan's economy, we are seeking foreign direct investment, FATF, ongoing situation
right.
in
There are numerous
Afghanistan.
challenges.
There's so
There's no
many
denying
challenges. And given these challenges, I think this is not the right time, does not seem to be the right time for any kind of agitation which can destabilize the democratically elected government in Islamabad.
Right, I'm going to go to Basab. Basab, do you think that Maulana Saab will be able to amass the numbers that he's talking about, first of all? Then, we'll follow from there.
Well, if you look at the history of religious political parties,
Right.
Gathering number is never a problem for them. Only thing is that those numbers never get translated into votes. Whether it's Jamaat Islami or Maulana Fazlur Rahman, since they have deep roots in the seminaries, in
Right.
religious schools, where there are not hundreds but thousands of children studying. And then religion is something that people are very touched. They will, once you take the name of religion, even how bitter the pill might be, if you sugarcoat it in religion, people will be willing to follow. I know in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Balochistan, people are selling their wives' jewelry to fund for the for this standoff.
This March.
Yes, fund for this march. I mean, if you ask them what is the reason, they will not know. But they will think that they are doing a great service to Islam. So gathering a number is not a problem, and that is why also government ministers in shambles, because they fear that gathering a number, bringing people to Islamabad is a child's play for Maulana Sahab. What happens afterwards would then depend on how government reacts and act in this sensitive situation. Because if government acts foolishly, and as it appears from statements of some of the ministers, and things get exacerbated, their law and order situation, then it will have far-reaching effect on the political stability and ultimately affect the economy as well.
What about the committee that's been formed? What's your take on that? Do you think that it's perhaps should have been done sooner to get the kind of results that the government was hoping? Do you think the government's hoping that they will deliver at this stage, or do you think they think that as far as as far as the march is concerned, it's now a fait accompli?
The purpose of forming these committees is to ensure or make an endeavor to bring the political temperature down. But what's the point of having those committees, or what could that poor committee do if in the morning its notification is issued and the committee is formed, in the afternoon Prime Minister is calling Maulana Sahab a diesel? So you see that political taunting, he should now come out of the role of opposition leader, he should act as a statesman. If his political, if his workers chant slogan, he doesn't need to repeat it,
right.
because then the very wrong message will be given. And even if the political parties, Maulana Sahab or the government committee wants to come to a face-saving solution, these chanting, these taunting remarks would spoil the whole game.
But do you think it's part of, maybe because he doesn't think that Maulana Sahab will actually be able to actually deliver whatever he's saying, that there's not, that the government is confident that they can handle him?
If you look at the statements of the ministers, they seem to be shambling. And then if Maulana is not a political threat, what's the point of having a committee then? What are you negotiating? Let him come.
But it would be politically correct to have a committee.
No, but the thing is, if we were sure, if the government was sure that Maulana would not be able to muster enough people, bring enough people in Islamabad, they should then give a free hand to Maulana, come and he will die his own political death.
But that seems to be what, I mean, of course the government is negotiating, which is the right thing to do. They're trying to, the committee has been formed. It's making, whether it makes headway or not.
Marukh, for negotiation, a congenial environment has to be created. And if the subordinate ministers are trying to mend the ways and the Prime Minister giving taunting remarks, the political temperature will go even more high.
Right, I'm going to go to Javed Saab. I'll come. Javed Saab, do you agree with what Barrister was saying, that there is, what's behind this two-prong approach, let's call it that, of the government at this time? Do you think that the committee is going to be able to achieve something as far as Maulana Sahab is concerned, or the march will happen regardless at this time, and that Maulana Sahab is quite determined to forge ahead?
Maulana is quite determined, and he has been mobilizing his workers, supporters for the last almost 2 months, 8 weeks now. Even transport arrangements have been made. A lot of money has been spent. A lot of money has been raised for this march, and there's no doubt that he will bring these people to Islamabad. Whether they are allowed to come into Islamabad, today's meeting, which was held under the chairmanship of the IG of Islamabad, they decided not to allow Maulana's marchers to enter into the capital. They could be stopped outside Islamabad. That has its own implications. That could lead to a clash between the law enforcement agencies and the Maulana's supporters. So let's hope that bloodshed or a sort of clash between the political workers and the administration is avoided at all costs. then the role of the committee comes in. I mean, Parvez Khattak, Sahab, Defense Minister, he is heading that committee, Shafkat Mahmood, some other people. They will negotiate with Maulana, and all political governments have been negotiating to avoid these kind of situations, to avoid any kind of clashes, to avoid any kind of bloodshed, any violence. So therefore, it is a right approach for the government to form a committee and to discuss and talk with Maulana. Behind the scene, there have been talks going on between Maulana and the government functionaries, and I think some other elements, but that didn't succeed. I mean, they were unable to convince Maulana to call off this march. So Maulana has done a lot of homework. Maulana has been mobilizing his supporter.
Right.
He is determined to do it. All he was doing, that he was trying to enlist the support of PPP and PMLN.
But do you think it makes a difference? You know, that's what I want to come to. As far as the Maulana is concerned, if, for example, the PMLN bowed out and they said that they didn't want to be part of this march, do you think it would make a difference to Maulana Sahab or the numbers or his strategy, for example?
No, it won't make a big difference, because I think the the majority of the marchers who are going to come to Islamabad for this Azadi March, they will be from JUI and religious parties. But PMLN will obviously bring
But what do
their
they
own
mean
people.
when they say that they'll welcome them, they will bring garlands of roses, they will shower them with
Today,
rose
Islamabad
petals?
police has issued a notification, warned the people not to let the chairs, the tents, even the music DJ system to them, because those who do it would be booked under Section 144.
Yeah, but you know, this has been
So
done
then-
in the past as well.
But that doesn't make a difference.
know,
it hasn't made a difference in the
doesn't
past.
make-
right?
No,
it-
it was
that will
always
lead to a very ugly situation, because these religious people, you know, the people who are studying in these madrasas and religious seminaries,
Right.
they are very hardened people, and you know, they are going to come with their own dandas, you know, and that will lead to a very ugly
So,
situation. Let's
you know, a
avoid that.
clash, if you know,
I
God
think
forbid it
the
happens,
the
will not
government's-
work for anyone.
The government committee of which has been formed for negotiations must start these negotiations immediately. You know, Maulana has said that he is not going to compromise on anything short of the designation of the
Right.
Prime
Which
Minister,
is unrealistic.
which is undoable. I mean,
Right.
which is unrealistic. So therefore, Maulana is a
So
very
what's behind
he's a very
it then?
shrewd
Let's talk
he's a
about
shrewd
that.
politician.
But if he's not going to be able to achieve, it's an unachievable. I'm going to go to Bash Sahab. I'll come back to you, Javed Sahab. If it's unachievable, indeed, you know, and it seems to be certainly as far as, you know, resignation of the Prime Minister is concerned, what is Maulana Sahab after? You know, is he trying to pressurize the government? What is his ultimate goal, in your opinion?
I think the first aim was to become relevant in Pakistani politics again.
Right.
And I think he has succeeded. That's why we are all discussing
Right, of
Maulana
course.
Sahab
You're
today.
right. That is, you know,
Yes.
he's become the
Before
topic of the
even
conversation, certainly.
taking the first step out of his house, he's on media everywhere. Even I think Maulana Sahab would have known, I think he's so experienced politician, that by just returning up to Islamabad with 5 lakh or 6 lakh people, government won't collapse. And the best example was PTI. There were so many people for such a long time sit-in was staged, but the government didn't collapse.
But what about
But I
other
think
effects?
he will be happy to settle for something lesser than that. The government would have to step back from its hardline position, and the opposition would also have to step back for hardline
So what
position.
will he get, in your opinion?
Well,
I mean, of
on a
course, I mean, he
political
doesn't get-
chess table, on a political negotiation, there are so many things that can be negotiated. I mean,
But you-
Maulana Sahab is a very shrewd politician. He is keeping all his cards to his chest.
Right.
But I'm sure if a sincere effort is made, because at the end of the day, Maulana Sahab was also sure that come what may, when you sit for 200 days, the government won't collapse. So there he should be able to agree on something lesser than that. But the first and primarily important thing is that government should create a congenial environment for peaceful negotiation, and
But in your
avoid
opinion-
government also always acts as an elder brother in this case, and have an open heart, big heart, and show magnanimity, rather than hurling threats of committing torture or committing police pattern charge, etc. on them.
But even if he does show that kind of magnanimity that you're speaking about, what, in your opinion, what do you think is the kind of concession that he will be satisfied by?
Because at the moment there is no charter of demand, specific charter of demand coming from Maulana Saab.
Rather than the
it's
unrealistic one.
anybody's game. Yes, yes,
Right.
I mean, even in his heart, he also knows that
It
he
can't
can't
be,
get
right.
that. And in politics, I mean, you normally demand something very higher and then settle on something less.
Right.
So once the parties sit on a negotiating table, I'm sure because PTI sit in and then PAT sit in also demanded resignation of Nawaz Sharif, and both could not get it. But they settled on a judicial commission, something like that. So perhaps some sort of commission to re-inquire into the election process that was held previously, and something like that, a judicial commission or a parliamentary committee can
But
be
even
formed.
if that were to happen, I'm going to go to Javed Saab. Javed Saab, even if that were to happen, it would still be. And let's talk about the past, for example. Of course, the PTI, when they came out and the protest happened, they were unable to, actually dislodge the government. There's no doubt about that. But what did they achieve? Let's talk about that. Do you think that Maulana is after some sort of, popularity, legitimacy of some sort of, like we said, relevance, of course, certainly?
I don't think so. Maulana is not a attention seeker. He's a very seasoned politician. He knows politics for the last 4 or 5 decades. He has been in the business. And even today, he is in a very serious business. He can't be convinced by the government on these very shallow, insignificant kind of promises that what kind of a demands he has put forward. The only demand is to topple the government. And he believes that government has not been democratically elected, and he has cast doubts over the whole electoral process in Pakistan. And I think as far as the government is concerned, he has cast doubts. He believes that the electoral process is a suspect, and he doesn't believe that the government or the whole system is democratically elected. But the problem is this. Nobody understands what Maulana is going for. Everyone is talking about Maulana's intentions, and Maulana is keeping his cards close to his chest. He's not even sharing his strategy with his political allies like PMLN and PPP. Even they don't know. They are in a huge kind of a mess they find themselves in, and they don't know what Maulana is going to do once he reaches Islamabad. I think that's a $1 million question. By design or otherwise, Maulana is not showing his cards. Whether he's going to sit in Islamabad,
do you think it's possible he's not sure himself?
He has left. I think he has left the ambiguity very deliberately. If he comes in large numbers in Islamabad, and if he lodges himself somewhere, I think it would be very difficult for the government to dislodge him, and he is going to create real problems for the government. He's a looming threat to the whole system. And I think the gathering storm, the government doesn't understand what is happening on the ground. Very non-serious statements coming from different ministers. I think it is about time that the cabinet should sit and sort of discuss a strategy, which is a political strategy. Meeting Maulana with force would be playing in the hands of the
protesters. But certainly trying to hold him out of the capital and prevent him from entering is a strategy.
I think, Marok, it is the responsibility of the law enforcement agencies, and they should have a strategy in place. Whether they would like to stop him at the entering points to Islamabad, or maybe in the provinces itself, maybe the provincial law enforcement agencies could stop them from coming to Islamabad. I think we haven't seen any clear-cut or categoric kind of a strategy on part of the government. I think it would be naive not to expect Maulana reaching Islamabad. It would be really, really naive if they believe that Maulana is not going to come. He might call off his protest strike or his march towards Islamabad. Maulana seems to be a very determined person right now.
You think he will come, regardless
He is
of whatever
determined.
happens?
He is going to reach Islamabad. And one more thing, which is a serious thing, he is recruiting the stormtroopers as well. Why I'm using this particular terminology? I've seen the videos, etc. The stormtroopers concept, you know that where it comes from. It comes from the Nazi Germany. And Maulana believes that he has the force, he has the cadre, he has the trained people. And once he reaches Islamabad, he can paralyze the system. And then I think he would be in a position to dictate his terms to the government and to the establishment as well. I think this is what he's banking upon.
But what do you think his terms will be eventually? This is what I asked Bas.
I believe terms, very simple strategy. to damage the government through 1,000 cuts. Nothing else. You can't topple the government.
And what
This
will
is
he
for
achieve?
sure.
And what will he achieve by
You
doing
damage the government by 1,000 cuts, do diminish the credibility and the stature of the government to the extent that it becomes irrelevant.
Do you agree, Javed Sahab, the picture that Jadoon Sahab is painting is quite, unfortunately, it seems to be quite abysmal. Do you agree with that? Do you think that that's what Maulana Sahab is after and that he has plans to damage the government?
Well, obviously, he has planned this march to discredit the government. And the fact is that the reality on the ground is favoring Maulana. Because in the last 1 year,
Right.
the government has not been able to deliver on the commitments and promises that it had made to the people of Pakistan. Of all these promises, the promise to improve the economy of the country has not been done. So I think that's creating a lot of disappointment, disenchantment among the general public. And Maulana and other political parties are trying to cash in on that situation. That's one. And I think there are other issues as well. The issue of Kashmir,
Right.
Although it's not of the making of this government or for that matter anybody else,
Right.
but this Kashmir issue is also creating a lot of questions, raising a lot of questions in the minds of the people of Pakistan, that has it been handled properly? Has it been handled shrewdly? Or has our government lived up to the expectations of the people? So this is another issue that is fueling the march, and that will fuel the march. So there are so many issues, and it is too early. Of course, it is too early to judge the performance of a government in 1 year time.
Right, and
But
do you think
obviously,
part of the fact that the government perhaps is, there's no denying the fact that the government and the military at this time enjoy the kind of relationship, they seem to be on one page with regard to everything, that, is in a sense unprecedented, the kind of relationship that we've seen with the military and the government. Do you think part of that, part of the confidence that the government feels at this time is because they know that they have the support of the military standing behind them, and they know that at this time they can actually deal with any challenge that comes forth?
well, it's a well-known fact that the military and the current government, they are on the same page.
Right.
But Maulana, through this march and through his speeches and well-crafted speeches, is trying to create a wedge
Right.
between the establishment and this current government. He's playing his cards very intelligently. So let's see what happens. I mean, what is the ultimate objective of Maulana? What is he going to achieve from this march?
Right.
Probably he'll play his cards, or he'll place his cards on the table when he reaches Islamabad. So let's see what he does. But I think he is playing his game very intelligently and keeping everybody guessing as to what he is going to do. But obviously has said that he is going to bring 1.5 million people to Islamabad. Even if he is able to bring 200,000
Yes.
people or 100,000 people, Islamabad will be crippled. And we know it, that when this Dharna was staged by PTI and Tairul Qadri Saab, the entire capital was crippled and paralyzed, and
Right.
the system of the government had come to a standstill. And the citizens of Islamabad and Rawalpindi, they suffered a lot. So Maulana's march is going to create a lot of problems for the common citizens of
Do you think there's
Pakistan.
anything the government can offer him short of, of course, the Prime Minister resigning, that will satisfy him, Javed Sahab, at this time?
I don't think so. Maulana, I don't believe he is going to back down. He has a very, I think, very comprehensive strategy, and he is going to do what he believes he wants to do. Resignation, I don't think so. Government is even going to consider that
Of course not.
demand of Maulana.
And it would be,
And
of
I
course,
think
unrealistic
he
for
is
them.
morally not even justified to demand Prime Minister's
Right,
resignation.
exactly.
On the basis of, I agree with Javed Saab that performance of the government has been dismal in so many ways, in so many sectors.
But you have to
And
give the
given-
government time. At this time,
I
a
think
year
even,
into the government.
But judging a government on the basis
Right.
of 1 year's performance is not a justified way to judge the government. You can criticize some of the policies of the government,
Especially
but you
when
really can't say
right,
that
and of
on the
course-
basis of 14 months performance of the government, one should start demanding the resignation of the Prime Minister and toppling the democratically elected government. But I strongly
And what
believe
kind
that
of a parliamentary process is this where, you bring a number of people, whether it's 1.2 million, whether it's, a
Yes.
couple of 100,000 people, and you try to hold hostage the capital of the country, and then you demand the resignation? What kind of precedent are we setting for the future?
I think, Maruf, I believe what Maulana says, 1 million or 1.5 million or more than that,
Even
is
half,
very, very hard to gather such large number of people in Islamabad.
Right.
As Javed Saab said, I think even 100,000 people or maybe even 50,000 people are enough to cripple the government in Islamabad. I think Maulana is primarily banking what he is going to do. If he is able to bring a large number of people into the federal capital, and if he lodges himself at a strategic point in Islamabad where he is
If
able
he's
to
able to
cripple,
enter and come here.
paralyze the government, I think then he will start dictating his terms. And I tend to agree once again that he's trying to create a wedge between the establishment and the government itself. So I think his signals are towards the establishment that he is not going to clash with the establishment, and his target is the government, PTI government. And
But he will clash, obviously, if the military stands
I
behind
think
the government,
any
which it seems to
Maruf,
us.
any political campaigner would be eyeing the kind of a conflict or confrontation between the protesters and the security forces. And I think ultimately, at the end of the day, the protesters, they stand to gain from the violence perpetrated by the government agencies. And even if there is a single, God forbid, a single dead body, I think this is going to catapult this movement in a different form. And that is why I'm saying that government should come with a very clear strategy, how they are going to deal with it. Whether they are going to allow the Maulana's marchers into Islamabad, or they're going to stop them somewhere in the provinces or
But
at
like
the
Baisar Saab
fringes
was
of
saying that they will
Islamabad
probably,
capital.
right, at the fringes of the capital, right? Baisar Saab, that's what you were saying, that as far as the notification today, that they plan to stop them outside the capital.
But these things, these notifications mean
Of course, they
nothing.
will
We have
keep on
seen,
coming till the
and
end.
you're just saying that the Maulana should not set a precedent of bringing in 10,000 people, 20,000 people, and start demanding resignation of the government. That precedent has already been set, not only by PTI but Dr. Tahir al-Qadri as well, 2 times.
Right.
And how absurd his demands were.
Very
That
true,
changed the
very
entire
true.
system. I don't
Right.
believe in judiciary and things like that. Ultimately,
But
he
that
got nothing
fizzled
out of it.
right, exactly.
And that's
That's
a
what I'm
very
saying.
bad precedent. We must not repeat that. 2 wrongs never do make a right. But
But
unfortunately,
it did destabilize the system.
the harm was done.
So the point really is that, even if he doesn't achieve what he wants to, which,
At
doesn't
least
seem
he'll
like he
make
will,
himself
he
relevant
would-
to the
yes.
real forces.
And he will cause discomfort, he will cause
He will
inconvenience
cause
at the
severe
very least
discomfort, and
to
that's
the
what he
people.
wants.
And
That's
which
what
is
he
how
wants.
he chooses
Want
to become
make
relevant.
himself relevant in the political chess game.
Right.
And then demands would
I
be
think he has already made it.
already made it.
Every media.
So anybody who gets up, who has a considerable number of followers and says that they want to march towards the capital, makes themselves relevant.
Unless the people who set this precedent few years back come on national TV and apologize that we did wrong and now Maulana is doing wrong, then I think there will be some moral authority
I
to
think
curb and take action against
changing a
this
government
protest.
through the street power and through violent methods is not democracy.
Right, exactly.
I think the architect of modern democracy, they have already said it, that one of the most beautiful aspect of a modern democracy is that you can change a government without violence through the ballot.
But
So
we've spoken, as far as the PMLN and PPP is concerned, you have to give them that, that
I
they
think
are at least acknowledging.
they understand the implications.
Do you think they're fearful of the just destabilizing
Exactly.
the system?
They can understand the implications of such a situation, a clash between the law enforcement agencies and the political workers and people dying on streets and bloodshed and all that. That's very ugly, and that's inconceivable for these political parties because they have experienced these kind of things in the past. So I think what is Maulana's game plan? I believe that, Maulana has not gone to a court of law or an election tribunal about his defeat in his own constituency. If he had done it, then this course was open before him.
And if we talk about the PTI, there is that difference.
Exactly.
That they tried to go through the legal process.
Legal procedure
Right.
first, and they demanded that
Right.
the ballot boxes in 4 constituencies be opened,
Right,
recounted,
right.
votes recounted. Maulana is not doing this. Maulana is banking only on street power, on agitation, on putting political pressure on the government, and what he wants to achieve, the political objectives that he wants to achieve are not achievable through this method. And that's why I think PMLN and PPP, they are giving only, extending their support to Maulana, but I don't think they are really with Maulana to create an ugly situation, a violence in the capital, a violence, and that could lead to bloodshed.
Right. If it actually comes to that situation, I'm going to go to Jadoon Saab. Jadoon Saab, if it comes down to it and Maulana Saab brings a considerable number of followers, he, God forbid, you know, I mean, I don't think it's a great scenario, but if he actually manages to enter the capital, and considering the kind of support that he wields at that time, isn't the PMLN and PPP leaving the doors open for their followers to then join him, or, you know, for them themselves to then become a part of this march?
I do not believe they are going to do that.
You don't
Maruk, why? Because they are the stakeholders in the system.
Right.
If today they are in opposition, tomorrow they could be in power.
Right.
Maulana is not a real stakeholder in the system. He has never been a big parliamentary strength, and I don't believe that he is ever going to be a parliamentary strength where he is going to form a government in his PPP and PMLN. These two political parties are the biggest stakeholders, along with PTI and other democratic forces. So I think they will never be a part of an exercise that is going to...
Do you think political parties have thought that far ahead in the past?
But this time around, I think they have shown a lot of maturity. Statements coming from Mr. Bilawal and coming from Shahbaz Sharif and many other PMLN leaders, they are very decent, nice, and very wise people in these two political parties. Despite the fact that main leadership is behind the bars, I think they have behaved quite maturely, and they have declined Maulana's offer to become part of this agitational politics so that he can destabilize the government.
But
I think they are very categorically stated.
So either they haven't openly chosen to sit out, which would have been more, principled.
I think they have done that.
No,
This is what Bilawal Bhutto said.
Bilawal Bhutto started
He said
saying
they will not
that
be-
whole,
they
I
will
don't
not be
understand
part
that
of
whole
any effort.
welcoming bit. I really don't
They will
understand
not be part
that.
of any effort.
No,
That just keeps coming across.
but the PMLN and PPP
Right.
will not be happy if Maulana steals the show.
That's what I'm saying.
I
if
mean,
he does come,
if he
exactly.
becomes,
Outlet
if he
open for them.
emerges,
Right.
And jump the bandwagon
Yeah.
when it is
Exactly.
politically
Yeah.
viable for
Viable.
them.
Exactly.
So if he emerges as hero
Right.
in this whole game, then the PPP and PMLN will be left high and dry.
And why won't they want to join him on the stage and take the
So
bow?
therefore,
along
I
with him?
think behind the scene they must be talking on all these
But
issues.
Javed Sahab, if the exercise becomes violent, I think they would
That's what I'm
restrain from
saying.
becoming...
They want to leave the
I
door
think the
open.
yardstick would be the number of people that come with Maulana Sahib.
Right.
A number
I
of people-
personally am of
and
that
I
opinion
think,
also.
The factor of violence as well.
Yes, if they
I
enter
don't-
Islamabad peacefully or not through enough violence, I think they will come and join it.
Then, you know,
Because imagine, what would Maulana Sahab's speeches would be about on stage, on the container? They will be anti-government. And why
Exactly.
would not People
And
Party
they
or
should
PMLN
understand.
come and
exactly. It does suit them to benefit from it.
Yeah.
Even if, on principle, they're saying, well, let's see and we'll welcome them.
well, there are
So
no
they want to
principles for People's
in the
Party or
past,
PMLN.
I think-
Sometimes PMLQ becomes their political ally, and then sometimes they blame Benazir.
This is
So
what
one
is-
would argue
But
whether
it
there
is
are
no
any
principles in
principles
our
in
politics.
politics
I think,
at all.
Maruk, this is what is called realpolitik.
Right.
I think if you see an opportunity, you grab it. That
Right.
doesn't mean that you have got
But
certain
in the
principles.
But they are, you will have to acknowledge, Adun Sahab, then that they are leaving the door open
They will
for,
definitely.
for that
They-
kind of
Of course
opportunity.
they will. They will.
But in the past, change of the government, 2 mechanisms were available to
Right.
them, at least one. Article 58(2)(b). When the law and order situation breaks down, President would intervene and dissolve the assemblies,
Right.
dismiss the government, call for new elections. That option is not available here.
Right.
And these parties, including Maulana, know it very well that the establishment is on the side of the government. I mean, they are on the same page. So
Right.
intervention of establishment immediately and imposing martial law is out of the question. So what are they aiming at? I mean, destabilizing government means if they destabilize the government to that extent where the fresh elections and negotiations outside the parliament
Right.
and fresh election date is fixed and just after 12 or 13 months, that's also unthinkable. So, I mean, it's not
And what kind
it's
of a
not in
government
the
would then
interest
follow
of democracy.
suit, and
It
what
is not
kind
in
of a
the
continuity would that mean
There'll
for
be
the
constitutional collapse.
it will, I think it is not in the interest
which
of the
is perhaps
country.
what the PMLN PPP may be thinking
Exactly,
about.
Because
they
they
are.
have been victims of, if the
Right.
third force comes, they both have
Yeah.
been victim to that.
This is another important point which I think should be considered, that if government is banking on the support of the military in any situation where there's a confrontation between the protesters and the government agencies, the history shows that Pakistan Army will never be part of any exercise where they would be confronting the people of Pakistan, whether they belong to JUIF or PPP or PMLN or whatever you call them. I think that's the X factor which the government should understand. If they are banking blindly on the support of the army, I think they should rule it out. Any kind of a violence between the protesters and the law enforcers, if it leads to casualties, and if a situation, hypothetically speaking, reaches a point where they need to call the Pakistan Army into that, they must not bank on Pakistan Army to be playing a role of a police force. They will never confront the people of Pakistan. And that is the point I think Maulana wants to take the situation to a
To that
point,
level. Oh,
yes,
that's
to
very
that
nice,
level,
yes.
where the military or the establishment becomes the arbiter. And then I think he believes that he can put his cards on the table, and then the bargaining
And
position
I think the
answers.
only option left is fresh elections. That could happen only after 13 months. That is a legal democratic course available.
Right. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. But quickly, Barsha, what about the right of protest? We've interestingly, as in the course of, we were earlier talking about this, and it keeps coming up, and lawyers talk about it more than other people. That there is the right of protest on one side, and then there is this whole other. Like realpolitik, we're talking about reality of politics, the way that it can be used, the way it can actually lead to a deadlock or inconvenience, all of that. But what about the right of protest per se?
The right to protest is definitely finely woven into our fabric of our constitution. It's a fundamental right. But that does not give a tacit license to a political party or a political force or to a person to intrude upon the rights of the other citizens as well. And that's when PAT was protesting in Islamabad, PTI was protesting in Islamabad. I was very vociferous that, okay, fair enough, they have a right to protest, but they should protest in a manner and at a place where the civil life of Islamabad, civic life, does not get disturbed. And the same thing I would say about Maulana. Perhaps he can be given allotted parade ground, which is a secluded area.
Islamabad
High
High Court has
once
come
they
up,
designated that place,
Islamabad High
Yeah,
Court
yeah,
has
there's
given
a
a verdict.
judgment of Islamabad
Right,
High
of
Court.
course,
There's
yes.
a judgment
There
of Islamabad
is,
High Court
exactly,
that
that's
parade
right.
ground should be renamed as
Used,
Democracy Park and should be designated for holding protests so
Right.
that their voice could also be heard. At the same time, the civic life of Islamabad also does not get
Does not
disturbed.
get disrupted. But that doesn't give anybody the right to hold the city hostage.
Certainly not.
Certainly not.
Certainly not.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Javed Siddique Saab. Thank you for your time. Javed Jadoon Saab, thank you for being with us today. Barrister Saeed Masroor Shah, thank you for actually joining us today. As far as the right of protest is concerned, as we discussed, it's an inherent right, and there's no denying that it exists. But it to be used in this way to cause, at the very least, inconvenience, to move towards a deadlock, to try to pressurize the government, to try to put up these kind of unrealistic demands, to disrupt the system, to dislodge the system, to create this kind of instability, is at the very least something that at this time, not only the political parties, but a religious leader like Maulana Saab needs to think about. He needs to think about the continuity of politics. He needs to think about democracy at this time before taking such a huge step at this time, and when the government faces numerous challenges, and Pakistan itself as a country also faces a lot of challenges. Thank you so much for joining us.